Welcome to the Tailgate Podcast with your host, Al Blanton. At Tailgate, we celebrate the rich history of sports in the state of Alabama. So come with us as we relive great moments, great games, great players and coaches, and in the process, preserve memories for a lifetime. Is this like prime time for you right now? I mean, is like you got March Madness coming up, you got golf, weather, it's getting a little, sunnier outside, sun's out, guns out, maybe hitting La Villa, Spinnaker. I don't know. I mean, like this time of year, is this kind of like it's
Wow, La Villa Spinnaker. I posted something the other day. I reposted about La Villa in those days. Glad we made it out of there, partner. Yeah, it is but this time of year for me is more, it's kind of sentimental a little bit. It's wonderful, but like this was my dad and I's time, man. I mean, this was like the selection show and we usually I wasn't involved, really with Mississippi State basketball at all at that time. And so he and I would always watch the tournament together, watch the games together, compare brackets. And he always wanted me to be into TV. And when I got into TV heavily was really after he passed away. And I think that I tell people all the time it's crazy that like he's with me through all these times, but like it's different than it was when he was here. He's still here in a sense, but like he's kind of guiding it through a lot of these TV things that have happened. So like long story to answer, long way around to answer that question is yes, it's that time of year to me, but this is my relaxing time. Right before about 2 weeks before the high school season, about a month left in the basketball season is really tough on me because I've got to literally try to scout every state high school basketball team in the whole realm of Alabama, and you can't get to all of them. There's too many names, there's too many coaches, but you just try to find nuggets and try to find stories. And I think that is one thing that like Kevin Skarbinski is the best storyteller finder. And you know Kevin, and you can relate. You're one of those as well, in Northwest Alabama, and he can find nuggets that just make basketball come to life for me when Chuck Person's walking by when I used to go watch Chuck Person with my dad.
Mhm.
So like spiritual deep connection and sentimental part of the tournament. My daddy took me to the Danny Manning game because I was sitting in Birmingham at back then it wasn't Legacy. What was it? The BJCC. And I just loved that Oklahoma team. And I told daddy that I wanted to go to the Final Four and he took me. And daddy didn't have a lot of money at that time. Anybody that knows his story. And the very last game, the Danny Manning game, he found me a ticket for $150 and I got to go in the game and he didn't. I mean, that's what dads do.
Mm.
And that's the sacrifice my pop made for me. So yes, it's my favorite time of the year, but a lot of it to me is just an extension of like him and living on in the legacy that he taught me about basketball, whether it be talking about it, can't play it anymore. But it's a joy to just be able to compete still and participate in a game in some senses that like my dad taught me everything about.
Man, I feel the same way. We both lost our dads, and I mean, there was such a nostalgia about you and your dad and your connection to sports through your dad. I mean, I've got a 6-year-old son now, and we were talking the other night, and my dad did a really good job of like taking me to taking me to games, and it seemed like every game. We got to get to the tournament here in a second, but I mean, it seemed like every game we went to, like we'd get on the front row, or like we went to Riverfront Stadium one time in Cincinnati, and literally I sat with the Reds owner Marge Schott. Like my dad just spotted Marge Schott, walks over there, and then
What
like
up, Mark?
gets me over there. So so, and I'm just sitting with the Reds owner, and so about
You would throw out Marge shot.
yeah. I didn't write Marge Schott down on my notes before, but we got there, buddy.
Hey, you know what? I not to cut you, but like I truly believe, and I tell people this time about like my dogs that I just lost. They're 18 years old. I've seen a lot of grief in my life, man, and we're here for it for a reason. I truly believe that this is our dads looking down, like enjoying a laugh together about the things that they connected that we can still have connections and tell people about it. Because I don't think enough people do that and connect in a realm that like they're still alive if you want them to be,
Yeah.
and you. So I love that you used Marge shot. to
But
bring
there's
our
such a
dads.
connection with your dad. To end that story though, like a couple weeks later, or maybe like a month later, I get a signed Reds like season program by Marge Schott.
Oh,
And she had a Saint Bernard named Shotzi. And
Yeah.
Shotzi had signed the program and it had like a paw. Yeah, it was a paw. So anyway, all right, let's let's get to the
that's
let's get to the tournament. All right. The first thing I want to do is, and I know I sent you some questions, but I want to start out with like I want to talk about specific teams real quick. I want to talk about, what do these teams need to do? And I know you've been doing a lot of high school basketball, but I know you've been watching a lot of college basketball too. But like,
yeah.
what did these teams need to do to make a run? Okay, and we're going to start with Alabama. So what does Alabama need to do in the tournament to make a run?
Well, they haven't been great defensively. Number one, they can't protect the rim. Their guards are small on the perimeter. That's something that when you've seen the Final Four run, um, and just Alabama have success, they have been really elite guarding the ball defensively. They also have been able to protect the rim. And I think Diabate does great. Nelson does as much. I think Nelson has overachieved as a post player for what Nate Oates has asked him to do the last 2 years, as much as any kid in the nation. I remember 2 years ago when Grant Nelson first got to Alabama, and Nate Oates was okay with Tolu Smith catching the ball in the post because he knew that Grant Nelson was going to have to be able to guard guys one on one at times in the post to play the way Alabama wants to play. If you got a smaller and I mean he's not that small, but a non-five that can guard the five, that can spread the defense out, I think that's a huge deal. And then you can also play different ways when you have that rim protector. There's no Bediako in there now, Al. There's not. So you either got to guard the ball, you got to figure out a way to trap and get out of the other team's guards' best hands before they make a play. And the length on the perimeter, other than Sears is not a great defender. Holloway is definitely not a great defender. LeBaron Fallon's an NBA defender. So I think Fallon, and I've said it all year on our show, I think he is the highest level pro in the SEC as far as draft pick that nobody's talked about all year and nobody's really seen. He was hurt for 4 or 5 games and he just wasn't 100% himself. But you've seen in these last 5, 6 games, the minutes have gone up. He's playing at least 25 minutes a game. He's getting about 15 points a game. Fallon's got to be a star. And it somehow coexists with Mark Sears. I didn't really like that whole deal with all three of those guys. I don't think there's enough balls to go around because all those guys, other than Fallon, I mean, those two guys have to have the ball in their hand. However, for Alabama, two things it comes down to, three things really on offense. That was the defense part. They've got to win the free throw battle. They lead the league in free throw attempts. They've got to continue to get to the free throw line. And I think they will get more calls now. I think Sears, people got used to him kind of the back and forth bumps and stuff, and he wasn't getting those calls. They got to win the free throw battle. They can't make 5 or 6 threes. They don't have to make 18, but they can't just make 5 or 6. They need to make around that 8 to 12 3-point number. I think that's huge, and they've got to take care of the basketball. When Alabama's gotten in trouble, especially like at home against Ole Miss, it's when they've been turning the basketball over. I don't know if anybody can literally, if Florida and Auburn play at the highest level they can play at, and Auburn did play at the highest level they can play at against Alabama. Let's not kid ourselves. I mean, at the end of the season, but can they raise that level? Florida's the level right now. If Alabama plays as good as they can possibly play, I don't know that they can beat Florida, but 1 or 2 times out of 10. But those somehow protect the rim, don't turn it over, make a few threes, and win the free throw battle. I think those are the ingredients for Alabama to have a deep run. And I'm worried about that St. Mary's matchup too. Slowest team in the country. That sometimes can be kryptonite for that type of offense.
I agree with you. I think Auburn and Florida have the biggest ceilings of anybody. But would you agree with this statement? If Alabama is committed on the defensive end, if they show up committed on the defensive end, for the most part, they're going to put themselves in position to win the game.
They'll put themselves in a position to go to a Final Four. I don't know if I'm just telling you, with the length of Florida, if it's Florida you're talking about, I mean, both ends, finishing at the rim. Again, Alabama's guards are small. yes, if they play at the Nate Oates hard hat defensive, be able to guard the post 1-on-1 finish possession type level, yeah, they can beat anybody until they get to the Final Four. But there's 3 or 4 teams that if they play the way that they can play, I'm not sure how many times Alabama can beat them just because flat out the length. And I'm mainly speaking of Florida.
Mhm.
No, that ain't got nothing to do with Auburn. They've already beaten Auburn. But this is not – if they're going to do that, yes, defensively, raise the tempo, raise the level, get more stops, be more committed, all that. They're going to have to make 13, 14 threes to beat Florida because Florida's going to make 10.
Well, Philon did not play great against Florida. Alabama did not shoot well against Florida, and Florida shot extremely well. And that was the difference in the game. And the difference in the game in the Auburn game in Tuscaloosa was that Auburn shot the ball well and Alabama did not shoot the ball well. So I think to me it's those two things for Alabama. It's like you said, the ability to make threes and then the commitment on the defensive end. And that to me, and then obviously you throw in the X factor of what's Grant Nelson? Is he going to be able to play? Is he, what's his availability? And that to me, those are the keys. What about Auburn? Tell me what you think about Auburn. What does Auburn need to do?
Rebounding.
What's that?
Rebounding is a key. Rebounding is a key too with Alabama, just simply because they can dominate you. The games that they've dominated people on the boards, they've won the free throw battle, and they haven't turned it over more than 10 times. I think they've only lost 1 game this year. But obviously that's the ingredients.
Last time on the rebounding end, Florida out rebounded Alabama. So let's go to Auburn. Let's talk about Auburn. What are the keys to Auburn making a run?
I think there's 2 guys that just have been non-existent in the last probably 3 weeks, and that's Chaney Johnson and Pettiford, the freshman point guard. I think Chaney Johnson is as tough of a matchup that nobody's seen maybe in this tournament. The league knew how to scout him a little bit, and they started sitting on his left shoulder so he couldn't turn over his right, and he's not as good turning over his left shoulder. At the same time, all these teams have they've seen all this. I feel like that he is an X factor matchup problem that can get you 12 points and 6 rebounds, right? If you get that on the interior, that you're not, they haven't been getting that from him. In the first of the year, man, that guy was coming off, he was starting, right? And then they took him out, put Cardwell in with 1 more size. But Chaney Johnson needs to come in scoring, and he hasn't been getting looks. He hasn't been getting post touches. I think that they need to go back to him. Pettiford hit a freshman wall a little bit. He had those 3 or 4 games. That game at Georgia when he had 24, and I think Broome was out. Pettiford looked like he was going to be a big-time freshman, like a Johnson, like a Fears at Oklahoma. And then just kind of Auburn's very deep, and so experience started taking over. But I think Pettiford's a big-time, big-game player, Al. I think he was recruited to be that. And in a game to where there's a lull that happens early, and I don't think it'll be the first round. Auburn needs to look out that second round. I know everybody's talking about Louisville. I don't think it's going to be Louisville. I think it's going to be Mountain Brook, Ty Davis, and Creighton. And I don't think that's a great matchup for Auburn, the way that they can spread you out. Now, here's the thing about Auburn, Al. Those 2 players are important to pick their game up. Auburn is elite defensively. And on the perimeter, they are super elite. By far the best defensive team on the perimeter, hands down, that Bruce Pearl's ever had, anywhere he's ever been. You got so much length. Baker Mazara is a problem. Yeah, he's a problem, with his head games and how he acts and this and that. But for other teams, that guy is really hard to deal with if you're a 2 guard on the perimeter with a 6'6", 6'7", with that mentality and that length coming at you. Denver Jones has played in a lot of basketball games. He's played in the Final Four. He's a grown man. Kelly's 6'6". He's at Tech last year, and people really don't realize how good he is defensively. These guys can guard the ball and control the other team's guards and keep them from getting where they want to go. Nate Oates did a really good job in his slip screen action and the stuff they did in the second half with Sears at Auburn. I think that's what you're going to see is like Auburn's guards have to be looking at something. If you just let them guard the ball and let them guard their guy, you're going to have a lot of problems because it's really hard to go by those guys. Slip screens, that type of stuff is what gives them problems because you can pick and pop against Auburn because of all the pressure. I like Auburn in a sense of the mentality that Bruce is going to bring into this tournament. They're getting questioned again, Al. There's nobody in the country better at motivating their team when somebody don't believe in them than Bruce Pearl and finding a reason to get his guys hype and get his guys ready to play. And so if I'm an Auburn fan, we talked about this on the radio the other day. I think Auburn, this first game, I think it's going to be real bad. They're about to show everybody why they were number one all year, why everybody said they were the best team all year. They're tired of hearing about Florida. And I think you've got a collision course with Auburn and Florida that you're going to see just head to head in that Final Four game that actually could be the two best teams in the country playing for it in the semi.
I agree with you. All right, what about Mississippi State? I know you've been wanting to get to this one, so tell me, what is Mississippi State?
Are you sure I have?
Yeah.
So I'm going. I'm going to roll up there. I'm actually flying in. I found a flight that leaves Atlanta at like 10:30 at night, so it gets there like 12 after midnight in Raleigh. And I like when we play. I like that early game. I feel like we need to get in the gym and on the court and let's go play. We have not played great at times in the course of the year, end of the year, but at the same time, this league was so difficult. And when you can't, just like Alabama at times, the State can't protect the rim at all. And when you can't protect the rim and you're so focused on the way the help defense works that you're stopping penetration and stopping shots at the rim, that's why they're last in the league in guarding the three-point shot. It's because there's just so many wide open looks because you're so concerned with something else. The urgency was there against LSU. There's been times this year against Pitt. It was there out in Arizona in that first game we played. I can't remember who it was we played. It was there against A&M at home. It's not, the energy hasn't been consistent, Al, and that's been the thing. Riley Kugel is a NBA talent, but his motor's just not there all the time, and his head's not in the game all the time. Sometimes Melendez he breaks down on defense and doesn't play defense like he should. Josh Hubbard is not the most elite defender, right? And so when you've got a 5'10" guard on the floor in the SEC, he's going to get picked on a lot. And so, like, defensively, this is not a Chris Jans team that we're used to see. Offensively, they can score and make shots, though. They've scored 80, 90 points, I think 6 out of the last 9 games. You got to do that in this league. And this is transition year for Chris Jans, learning to, like, really promote offense, recruit offense, and then have offensive guys that you can plug into your defensive system. I think you'll see a different look probably next year. But rim protection is everything. Bigs are premium. Alabama's experiencing that this year. And I think in this tournament, this year, I like the matchup with Baylor because I think they'll zone a little bit. I think you can make shots against them. This Baylor team is not as talented as what Scott Drew has had. When they lost Cryer 2 years ago to Houston, to Houston, that was kind of the last of those just tough-minded guards from Baylor. But if State can get through this first matchup, actually, I like either team to keep it close against Duke in the second matchup. Whoever wins the Baylor-Mississippi State game, I think you're catching Duke at a really good time. Obviously, Flag's hurt. They've got another starter out. But how good is the ACC, and how long has it been since Duke played, a really good basketball team? It's been about a month and a half or 2 months at least. I mean, do you really want to throw Louisville in there? They're an 8th seed. I mean, the committee didn't think so. So I feel great if you're going to be an 8 with where the draw is. I'm not scared of Duke, but this Mississippi State basketball team is going to have to show a 2-game consistency that we did not see past the South Carolina opener and the Vandy win on the road. That was the only 2 games in the SEC that State really put it together. Literally 2 games in a row. So I'm cautiously optimistic. I know that's a cliched term. But again, in the tournament, anything can happen. And when you have not seen Chris Jans' defense, it can kind of hit you in a way that you might not be ready for. So 11 o'clock game, if we bring the energy, I like our chances against Baylor for sure.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, you've got to kind of be licking your chops a little bit if you're Mississippi State.
Well, the Big 12 doesn't scare you. The matchup with Baylor, is, I think, to your point, I think that goes to every SEC team. Every SEC team is looking at their jobs because they're just glad to be out of the league. Going to South Carolina was not easy. I sat right there next to the bench with my guy, Twitter guy, Cox by 90. And it was awesome. And that atmosphere was crazy. And they should have won about 6 games. Oklahoma was 14-0 going into the regular season SEC. And they ended up finishing 6-10 and got in the tournament. Texas, these teams are good. Johnson's a top 5 pick. Fears is a first-round pick. I mean, this league, you're gonna see 5 or 6 SEC. I predicted 5 teams in the final 8 and 3 in the final 4 from the SEC.
I mean, it may almost be almost like an optical illusion. I mean, I thought about, and I wrote about this too. Like, I mean, Alabama's gauntlet going through those last 7 games. I mean, that was one of the stretches, and you almost think like, is Alabama like about to throw in the towel almost? But then when you look at it from this perspective of, well, look at who they played. I mean, at Tennessee, at Missouri. I mean, Missouri shot 47 free throws.
Physical.
47 free throws. I knew going into that game that was going to be a tough game. I figured Alabama would bounce back and win it, but that is a tough environment to go in. Tennessee's a tough environment to go in at Auburn, and then playing, Florida, which is at that point wasn't really regarded as the number 1 team in the country. But you think about that gauntlet that Bama went through, and so it's almost like, to your point, like, is it almost a relief? Like, okay, good, we've got Baylor instead of like having to go to at Missouri. I'll take that all day long.
And we started touching base on this with certain teams. Like, felt like Ole Miss was going to be up at the top early of the SEC season because of how the schedule was. Had LSU twice, had South Carolina once, had Georgia before Georgia got on their roll. And Alabama's schedule was actually one of the lightest in the league for the first month, but then it got made up for big time down the stretch. And I just feel like the Auburn win shows where Alabama's program is, right? It's number 1 team in the country, already clinched. Give me all that, whatever you want to give it to me. Do I think Auburn played their best game that day? No. But at the same time, that's at Auburn. We all agree, any expert, you call us an expert, agree that Auburn is the toughest place to play in the country. Florida went there, Bama went there. And Bama went there at the end of the year at a time like when nobody gave them a chance to win. And it shows me that, like, Nate Oates can get these guys going. You heard him in his press conference saying, we got to do this. We're not really doing this. He's connected with his team. And this may be one of the best coaching jobs, to be quite honest, Al, that he's done. If you sit here and think about the talent level that he's had since he's been there, this is the least talented team he's had since he's been in Alabama.
What are your thoughts about him going stretches without calling timeouts?
I mean, he's a hard-nosed guy. Dean Smith was like that. Dean Smith, you look up, he never called timeout. I'll get on a soapbox here a little bit. It's kind of like why I'm so mad that the 1-and-1 has been taken out of high school basketball. And like now they're trying to take it out of college. Because I think the 1-and-1 is like one of the most pressure-filled situations when you're a young kid that you're ever going to be in, the higher level you go up in basketball. And now you don't even have to do that anymore. You just get 2 shots. And it would have hurt my scoring average back in the day because once I got in the bonus, I wasn't getting out. I was going to keep going downhill and getting in free ones. But I feel like that for Alabama, to be able to win, speaking of free throws, it's free throws, man. When you're not as talented, you got to go score it from the free throw line, and like this, Nate, I don't think Nate ever thinks his teams are tough enough. I think he always thinks that there's an extra gear, there's a different level that he can get them to. But in tournament type settings, you only got to win 4. You got to win 4 games right now, right? So all these things we talk about, all these things he's motivating on, all these things that are missing, all these things that haven't been there. How do we clean this stuff up in a 2-day span, 3-day span to get us ready to move on and get to the Sweet 16. You got to get to the Sweet 16 first. And I feel like Alabama right now, from a culture standpoint, program standpoint, fan base standpoint, that don't matter nearly as much though. It's a culture that expects to be in the Sweet 16, regardless of what injuries you got, next man up, what have you. So I think Oates is one of the top 5 basketball coaches in the country. I think Greg Byrne nailed it. I think he doesn't want to leave there. He wants to be there for a while. You got plenty of money. You're competing in the top league now in the country. And I expect Alabama, if Alabama gets past that second round, they're going the Final 8, in my opinion. Because I think Nelson will get back healthy then. But I said on the radio show earlier today, I do not like that matchup at all with St. Mary's. But we'll have to see what happens with the Tide.
I mean, look, I think Oates has done an incredible job. My son and I went to the Kentucky game, and I had to almost like pinch myself, like, hey, the fact that we're expected to beat Kentucky shows us how far our program is. We beat Kentucky 3 times, and I say we. I mean, I'm a Bama fan. I'm a Mississippi State grad. I'm an Alabama grad, but I just feel like when you've got stretches, the Tennessee game, the Florida game, you have these runs that Florida went on, that Tennessee went on, and I just think you've got to break it. I think like you can't always just let your team just play through it. You got to break the momentum and call them in and challenge them. That's just and look, nobody's heralding me as some great coach, but I just feel like you got to break that momentum.
I agree with you. And the old Dean Smith, Nate expects his senior point guard to be able to make a play, whether it be to get to the free throw line or somebody to go get an offensive rebound, hard hat, stick back for a basket, stop the momentum. He's one of those hardcore guys that, like, he doesn't mind, obviously, creating adversity to make his team better. He's done that. He's gone zone at Missouri when he wasn't guarding people well and got down 10-0 and lost at Missouri 2 years ago when they didn't win a game in the league, or whatever year that was. Your point is valid, and I agree with you. There's been times this year he should call a timeout. Yes. Some coaches, Dean Smith was like that. They are not going to do it. They are going to make their team play through adversity for down the road. I don't think in the tournament you're going to see him be as lax with these timeouts as you kind of have seen him all year. I think these guys usually got a method to his madness. And you know what? You probably need to trust him.
Fair point.
Roll Tide. Roll Tide.
All right, we got to go through this pretty quickly. All right, I've got some questions here. You and I are gonna have to just work through this very quick because I got some questions about your NCAA tournament experience. So we got to get to that. We're probably at the 30-minute mark already.
Hey, I talk a lot.
It's okay. I love it.
I do.
I love listening to you. All right, Cinderella.
You and maybe people, my mom, and maybe my dogs are dead now, so it's just probably you and my mom.
Yeah, I love listening to myself at the mirror. I mean, I have a Stuart. What was that on? Was it Stuart Smalley? You're good enough. You're smart enough.
Yeah.
Doggone it, people like you. I have one of those moments every morning.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't look in the mirror a lot though without hair like you people with hair do though. So go ahead.
Well, all right, Cinderella. Give me your Cinderella.
Define Cinderella first. Like,
I don't know. I mean, I've got 2 categories here. I've got Cinderella and mid-major sleeper. I mean, whatever. I don't know to me, a Cinderella is more of a, somebody that is almost lower than a mid-major, that's going to make a run. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's St. Peter's is who you're talking about.
Somebody like that.
So I'm going to give it to you like this. I think I've got Lips. I've really had a hard time with Lipscomb and Ole Miss because I think Ole Miss they look like a Sweet 16 team to me. They got the guard play, they got a big, but they're going to catch Lipscomb in that second round probably, and they may have to play Texas or Xavier, and I think or whoever they play in the first. I can't remember who it is. But I like Lipscomb as my Sweet 16 mid-major. I feel like Glenny has been banging on that door, and my good friend Coach Grant Leonard at Queens thinks this Lipscomb team is really, really good and ready to compete with anybody. They play off 2 feet. I think they're number 3 in the country in free throw percentage. That's a huge deal. They take a ton of them. But the other thing they're top 5 in that Lenny told us when he was on our show the other day, think about this combination, Al. They're also top 5 in the nation in not fouling. So they don't foul. They get the free throw line, I think, in the top 15 or 20, but then they make top 5%. That's a good combination, especially when you get in games to where you get some officials that are going to be a little call happy when you're dribbling, trying to get to 2 feet. I like Lipscomb possibly to go to the Sweet 16. I actually had McNeese going to the Sweet 16 as well. But I don't think that's surprising to anybody because it's Will Wade. I love the matchup they have against Clemson. The way I look at that game is I watched Mississippi State barely beat McNeese. I watched Alabama barely beat McNeese, both what you would consider home games. And when I say barely, I say less than 7 points. And Alabama could have given that game away. Mississippi State had to go get that game from McNeese. Samir Parker is a star scorer. He's healthy now for McNeese. South Carolina won, 3 games in the SEC? Clemson finished number 2 or 3 in the ACC, and South Carolina went there and won.
Mm-hmm.
I think McNeese will beat Clemson. I think they also can get past that second round game. But for me, if Will Wade wasn't there, that would be a Cinderella. With Will Wade there, nobody's considering that a Cinderella. So I'll give you McNeese as a tweener, either a Cinderella or a mid-major, what have you. Just kind of that with Will Wade being there, it's got an asterisk. High Point is definitely that team. There's no question that everybody thinks Purdue's vulnerable now without 80. Braden Smith will have something to say about that. One of the best guards in the country, probably one of the top 2 or 3 guards in the Big Ten. He's old now. Purdue's old, but High Point can score it, bro. And one of my old teammates that you know very well, Tang Hamilton, his son Kamani. I'm in Jackson, Mississippi right now. Right close to where he went to high school at Lanier. And Kamani signed at Mississippi State, Gatorade Player of the Year, the state of Mississippi. Didn't work out at State, transferred to High Point 2 years ago, and has been a star. Monty he's about 6'7". He's long like Tang was, and just can cover a lot of space, can shoot it. But they've got some guys, man, and they're 29-5 in the preseason before their conference. They had a couple of wins that kind of would turn your head. High Point is that Cinderella team that's really good, that people could fall in love with them because of the way they play. They play fast. They get up and down, similar to a Florida Gulf Coast, maybe not that high flying at times. High Point's that team. If they start winning, everybody will really start seeing if that slipper fits, and it'll be purple.
All right. Quick exit. Who's going to be bounced?
How high of a seed are you talking about? 1, 2, 3, 4? What? I mean,
I don't know, just anybody. I mean, like, who do you think is maybe a blue blood that like
you believe that I just said Izzo, Michigan State all day long?
Wouldn't surprise me. I had Kansas. I think Kansas is a quick exit. I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan State was a quick exit.
I agree with you on Kansas, 100%. And here's the thing: it's guard play on both of those teams. And Hunter Dickinson for Kansas cannot guard a ball screen. I mean, we can guard it better than he can. I mean, he's going to get in ISO ball situations with I don't know how big of a factor Boogie Flan can be, but if Wagner gets Dickinson in ball screen situations, that's not a good situation for Kansas. Kansas is going to have to go small in that game. And I don't know how Self's going to – I don't know. How can you tell a guy that you paid all this money to come play for you and to sit him down in the NCAA tournament if you don't have foul trouble? So I like your call on Kansas, but I don't like Michigan State's matchup with Marquette. I think Marquette's really good. I think the Big East is really underrated. And I do not think the Big Ten guard play is remotely close to what it's been or what it is in the SEC. So Michigan State would be that team for me.
Okay. All right. Toughest region.
Auburn.
South.
Yeah. I mean,
Look,
that bottom part of the bracket is not that difficult. The thing to me is if Auburn can get out of, I think it's kind of smoke and mirrors a little bit. All right, because the toughest one to get out of for the top two seeds is the region with Houston and Tennessee, regardless of what Rick Barnes's you know background in the tournament is. If you look, I look at the top two seeds always when I'm looking at what's the hardest bracket, always because they're supposed to get there. Now they could get upset. Alabama ain't healthy. Duke ain't healthy. Right, that one's wide open. If any injuries are in play there, right? Florida St. John's, that bracket's pretty much chalk to me. It's pretty much those two teams that are going to meet. So to me, it's got to be that Auburn bracket that, like, you're literally looking at playing the number 3 team in the Big East, who's a 9 seed for some reason. I have no idea why. Like, Creighton's good, man. Creighton's really good. And Louisville blew teams out at times this year with experience. Neither one of those teams, I thought Louisville should have been at worst a 6 and Creighton at worst a 7. So I think because of that draw in that second game with who you're getting, and I can't remember who Auburn's Sweet 16 is, but it's not great either, I don't think.
yeah, I agreed with you. When I was writing my stuff down, I said South, which is Auburn, Michigan State, and then Midwest, Houston. And to me, those are the two toughest brackets. And when you look at the top part of Auburn's bracket, it's Auburn, and then it's the 8-9 Louisville Creighton, and then you've got 5-12 Michigan, UC San Diego, which is a tough matchup. And then you've got Texas A&M, Yale, and then Mississippi, and either San Diego State and North Carolina. That top half to me is the toughest to come out of.
Michigan was that team, and here's why. One, you've got a point guard that played at Auburn last year, right? That's a huge deal, regardless of anything. He knows some ins and outs and scouting report that might be able to help you. Yeah, Auburn's deep. Yeah, what have you. Got to think about the coach that's there, Dusty May. I actually met Dusty May's father-in-law in the Orange Beach Rouse's parking lot about 2 weeks ago. How about that?
The Orange Beach what?
Orange Beach Rouse's, the Rouse's Market.
What's Rouse's? Hang on now.
Rouse's has the best meat at the beach, man. It's
Okay.
like Louisiana supermarket. It's like a Piggly Wiggly.
I thought you were going to say you misspoke and you were going to say the Ross. I didn't know if
I don't
shop at Ross, right?
I don't shop at Ross anymore. Just TJ Maxx for me. No, he was really cool, but like, I feel like they have a Vlad on the inside that was at Florida Atlantic that came with Dusty May, the 6'10 center. He's played in a lot of these tournament games. He knows how to use his body as a defender. If you go back and watch that whole FAU run, watch him protect the rim with his body, and he's done it the same year. He reminds me of Walker Kessler that played at Auburn. It was such a great rim protector with his body and his shot block hand. I feel like Michigan, with their size, you got Wolf as well. That's coming right behind the Creighton or Louisville game. I mean, there's not an easy game other than the first one to me for Auburn. And the only thing you're right about San Diego. I like them. You see San Diego. I like them a lot. I like their team a lot. Michigan will start slow. They will start slow in that game. If Michigan pulls out that game, you could see it be Auburn and Michigan to go to that final late game. But I expect some of these teams that, like, even Florida, Michigan, Tennessee, these teams that played on Sunday that had such a gauntlet to get through their SEC or their conference tournaments. I think you're going to see all those teams start slow, hint, hint, first half, but then hopefully pull it out in the end. There'll be some upsets. Like if Drake beat Missouri, a 30-win team, yeah, you would consider it an upset. But, like, I don't see that happening, bro. I see these SEC teams showing what they were before the SEC season. That's what I'm kind of seeing. I think the talent's there, and I think you're going to see a maybe 11-3 or a 10-4 worst case scenario in the opening rounds.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's get out. Let's do one more real quick, and then let's go to the Final Four. All right, watch out for this team,
Arizona, without question. When they're sitting right there in that bracket with Duke, I think there's two of them for me, actually. Arizona for sure. because I think Love has been there before. I think at times Arizona has been as explosive as anybody when they make shots. Can you consistently make shots throughout the course of a run? Now, Duke is elite defensively. They'll face them in the Sweet 16, but I think the matchup for Arizona rolling to that Sweet 16 is pretty good. And the reason I like them is because you don't know how healthy Cooper Flag is. You just don't. They got Bradley, the Alabama transfer that people will remember. Tommy Lloyd's been in these tournaments with Gonzaga for years and years and years. Arizona will be that one team, and then a team on the other side of the bracket would be Marquette. I love Cam Smith, and I love what he's done over the course of his career. And I feel like that Shaka's pressure defense in that bracket can give people problems. I've actually got Marquette going to my final eight after they beat Michigan State and then they get somebody else. I just like Marquette's matchups. And again, my personal opinion is the St. John's, the Marquette, the Creighton, and then there's probably one more in there that I'm forgetting about. I think the Big East was extremely underrated this year. That's the conference that I think you're going to see some teams sneak around, and they don't have a ton of them in there. But I think those teams can play, and I actually like their matchups. So definitely Marquette for me, and then Arizona out of the Big 12. I've just seen at times to where I feel like they look like a team that can make a deep run. But all these teams have flaws, Al. And it's like you said earlier about Alabama. Of these flaws, you're not going to be able to correct all of them, but can you mask them enough to take advantage of what your strengths are? And Arizona and Marquette are experienced teams that I feel like are well coached enough to do that in their bracket setups.
All right, let's talk Final Four. I'm going to give you mine, and you're going to disagree with me immediately. But I want to go ahead and throw them out there.
You got. Give me your three. I know who one of them is. Give me your three.
Auburn,
Auburn. Okay.
Bama, and Clemson.
Okay. Oh, I knew that. And Clemson.
My watch out for team is Clemson.
You and Clark Kellogg.
Nobody's talking about him.
Clark Kellogg, he's the only one. You and Clark Kellogg.
One. Nobody's really talking about him. They're fundamentally sound. I just feel like that they've got a path. I mean, like, I know you love McNeese, but then, they get Purdue, probably Purdue in the second round.
Yeah, they'll win. If they get through that first round, you're exactly right. They match up excellent with including that one seed. They match up well with Houston, bro. You're not off. You're not off at all. I don't like the Alabama just because I don't know how healthy Grant Nelson is. I mean, I can't. I don't know how healthy Janai Broome is either. Right? But I've got Alabama in my final eight, so I can't say I don't like it that much. You're Florida, yes, I'm with you.
Well, hang on. You feel like Grant Nelson matters that much to Alabama making a run?
They were down one when he went out.
I understand that. I know.
Bro,
I don't disagree with you.
You had two people on this team. Two people on this Alabama team this year that, in my opinion, were the guys that you got to have. Last year's run, the guy that nobody talks about how important he was, that he wasn't there all year this year, is Reitzel. Reitzel can guard three positions, and he can make three-pointers. That's the thing. Grant Nelson can guard 5'4", and he can make three-pointers and play inside. You got to have these versatile defenders to play this type system that Nate Oates plays. Reitzel out, not a healthy Grant Nelson. Grant Nelson not healthy. 80% of Grant Nelson rim protecting is not great. 100% is okay, right? But I feel like I got to see. Obviously you can't change your bracket, but and I know they didn't risk it. But yes, Grant Nelson is as important to his team as any big in this whole tournament, in my opinion.
He got a good report.
Yeah.
So it's positive. It's not a serious injury, so that's encouraging.
I feel like when Reitzel went out, this team totally changed to me. Just like what they want to do. And Nelson getting the good report. I don't think he'll play a lot in the first game. I think he'll be limited minutes. I think you'll let him get some feels, feel the NCAA tournament, some touches here and there. But I think he'll be limited with his minutes. But you don't want to lose the wind. If it's just a week, he'll be fine. But 2 weeks, man, you start losing that wind, and then you can't really get it back. And it starts affecting your play. I'd like Auburn, 100% to go to the Final Four. I think they regroup in a big way. I think they are going to dominate their first 2 games, like dominate. I think it'll be Creighton. I mean, it's not a great matchup, but I trust Bruce, and I trust Bruce with his back against the wall, and I trust Bruce when he's got something to question his team about. I think
It's almost like they're the number one overall seed, but they're going to play this disrespected card.
period.
You know,
Yeah. I mean, if they were the number 1 seed, really, everybody wouldn't be talking about Florida. You can put them where you want to. Everybody knows right now Florida's the best team in the country, except Auburn. Auburn knows that they're the best team in the country, and I think that's a big deal for Bruce and how he coaches and how he motivates and how he challenges his team. I love Auburn. Even though it's the toughest bracket, I think they get through there. I love Florida. I feel like there's not a lot of holes, man. Their guard play, the length, they can shoot it, they can get to 2 feet, they can offensive rebound, they can go high low, they can block shots, they can protect the rim, they can offensive rebound. They got it all, and they're deep, and they just wear people down. Their guards coming off the bench to be starting anywhere in the country. Love them. I like Duke. I'm taking those 3 1 seeds. I said I wanted to go Arizona, but I feel like Duke's really good defensively, Al, and I feel like they can get stops and they have an elite rim protector. And I think that's a huge deal. Shire's been there before. I think Flag gets through this week. I think they somehow get through. I think they're going to struggle in that second game, but I think they get through it. And then I can't believe that I'm sitting here saying this, and this is the first time I'm saying it. I went really back and forth on Houston and Tennessee. Who was it going to be? Who was going to be tough enough? And I can't believe I'm saying it this year, but I like Tennessee to go to the Final Four and Rick Barnes to go to the Final Four. And I'm the ultimate Calipari and the ultimate Rick Barnes hater when it comes to the NCAA tournament. But I've seen some different things from this Tennessee team. They can score it. They have to have a third guy. Gaines was that guy in the SEC tournament. Milicic has been it sometimes in the year. If both of those guys are scoring to help Cheney, Cheney, yeah, and Ziegler, Cade Phillips coming off the bench, they got to be able to go 8 deep, and they can't get in foul trouble. But their draw is pretty favorable, right? And then this Houston team can score it and score it well. And I think that will be the ultimate knockdown, drag out, heavyweight bout, Houston versus Tennessee. But I like Tennessee, so I like 3 1s and a 2 to go to the Final Four this year. I almost wanted to go with 4 1s, but it may bite me, but I feel like this Tennessee team is different. And I know we say it every year, but I like them. And I like what Coach Barnes has done with them. And I see the attention to detail in their game planning and their matchups and how they're attacking the certain one person on defense every single time. That's discipline.
And they've got a grit to them, man.
They do.
You saw it in the Alabama game. I mean, they basically, they almost willed themselves to win that game. I mean, they were down 10. Alabama couldn't ever, push it past 10.
Tell you something about what you're talking about though, about Meshack and making that shot. And this is why you know basketball and why I like talking to you about basketball. That dude is a 20% 3-point shooter at best his entire career, right? So if I'm not mistaken, in the last 3 SEC games, he made 5 3-pointers. Now that don't sound like a lot, but 2 of those were against Alabama.
He gets the top late. He gets the top that jump ball late. He knocks down the 3, and then he gives credit to the Lord at the end of the game. You gotta like that guy, man. I mean, look, I'm a Bama fan. You got to tip your hat to that guy.
I had a personal experience with Rick Barnes to where he wasn't real nice to us on a plane my sophomore year in college coming back from Alaska, me and Tyrone Washington. I won't go into the details of it, but I've always had a chip on my shoulder since then. He said something about Coach Williams that we didn't like, trying to poke fun, and we didn't like it. And it wasn't an altercation. We just kind of spouted back, whatever. But he's a good man and he believes in the right stuff. We're all competitive about here and there. And like that man has put the time in long enough. And that man's not a great X and O coach. But what I see from his team is I see he's gotten better at it. And I'm not sitting here saying I'm the end all be all of X and O, but man, anybody knows Rick Barnes. They run pin downs and they run step ins. That's all they ever do. And they run ball screens. It's not that hard to guard. He's always just had better players. Can't win a national championship with Kevin Durant, best college basketball player, unguardable all time. Yeah, there's something wrong. But the way they're attacking certain matchups, every possession, the way that Ziegler understands how to, and the biggest key to them, Al, is when Ziegler was out and hurt, they realized how good they could be if they moved and shared the basketball and the ball didn't stick in Ziegler's hands, kind of like it does in Alabama's hands with Sears sometimes, right? Tennessee is moving the ball and getting open shots, but they got to have Gainey and they got to have Milicic to be that third guy. And if they get third and fourth, you could end up seeing Tennessee go all the way to the final game.
Yeah. Well, to me, they've got a pretty easy path. I'm not going to say a very easy path. They've got a path. And to me, they've got the best path of a 2 seed to get there. All right, we got to move on.
Yeah.
Let's go to, I want to talk about your NCAA experience. I want you to take us inside. You're a freshman dealing with all this. I mean, you grew up in Winfield. You know, your first year, you get to go to the Final Four. You talk about a blessed man to be able to do that. And we had Daryl Wilson on last podcast. You need to watch that. But and we were we'd gotten into this discussion about, because when I was doing my research, for whatever reason, I had Cincinnati, then UConn, and he corrected me very quickly that it was UConn and then Cincinnati.
He'll do that.
Yeah.
He'll
So
do that.
so what were the most memorable moments for you as you're kind of walking through that? I mean, you've got some unbelievable teams, unbelievable experiences. You go to Indianapolis, you go to Rupp, you go to East Rutherford. What do you remember from that experience?
Well, Daryl was always my idol growing up in basketball, man. I mean, I played against him. He scored 50 points on me when I was a freshman. I mean, I just to even be in the same locker room with him to me was just a blessing. You mentioned blessings, and I didn't realize, I didn't understand. I wasn't nearly thankful enough like I am now that just what we were doing. I mean, it was the next game. I was a freshman. I'd always played in the state tournament. I'm used to going and competing for championships. And I mean, we really didn't expect to lose. We got on a hot streak there at the end of the year. And when Dante Jones started really playing well about 3 weeks to go in the season, we knew we had a shot because we had a lottery pick on the interior that could protect the rim. We had a point guard, Marcus Bullard, who was the biggest floor general, best floor general I've ever seen or I've ever played with. Obviously, Daryl was Daryl. And then you had, a general inside in Russell Walters that just manned everything defensively, got all the rebounds you had to get. We had pieces. We weren't deep, but what I remember about the run is we were about to play Kentucky in the SEC tournament final, and Daryl gave a speech before the game about how he didn't know if he'd ever play college basketball and how, moments and opportunities like this are few and far between. And I just remember him crying and how I didn't want to let him down. And it was basically the Nick Saban, everybody just do your job today. And we went out and we beat the number one team in the country, Untouchables, who people say is arguably the best team that was ever assembled with Rick Pitino. And, I vote for that because we beat them. But I remember after we won the game, we weren't surprised by how cool it was to sit and, like, as a kid, you watch these teams after they win a tournament with a net around their neck and stuff. And that was me. That was us. I mean, we were sitting there and we got to go. And then that first game we got to play against Sonny Smith, who was my idol, one of my dad's best friends, one of my mentors. He actually taught me how to shoot a basketball. And at the post game press conference, I ended up coming and make a couple of threes, and he was mad at himself because he taught me how to shoot. And so that moment and being named player of the game in that first moment when my team really needed me, because I tell people all the time, Al, man, I played 5 minutes in a Final Four game. and people look at me like I'm the greatest basketball player ever just because I played in the Final Four. Right, one assist. That's it. And like, but that moment in that first game, we don't get there, if I don't do my job. And the reason I say that is like my job was 11 minutes a game. When my team, I played 18 minutes in that game, but my team was struggling. My team needed me. They needed me to make a shot. Might need you to get a rebound. Might need you to get a stop. Might need you to go in and just foul the other team's best player a couple of times. Whatever that role is, this is when you have to be sacrificial enough to say, I'm going to do whatever I can just so I can get that next feeling. We got through the first round, came from behind to beat VCU. Then we just hammered Princeton, zoned Princeton. That's how good of a coach Richard Williams is. We zoned Princeton, and then we got this UConn. And another quick story about Daryl. I'll tell you this real quick. I'll never forget. Bull wanted to guard Ray Allen real bad. Well, Daryl was the two guard. It was Daryl's detail. Daryl was obviously trying to make a name for himself to go to the league and compete against Ray Allen, who would obviously be a first or second pick, whatever he was. And so all week, Bull's like, you better not let him get off early. He's going to be mine. You better not let him get off early. He's going to be mine. So Ray scored, I think he scored one early on transition. It wasn't really Daryl's fault. Well, then he scored one in the half court about it was about the 16, 20 mark, something like that. And ball went out of bounds. He said, Coach, and ball went out of bounds is our ball. Bull said, Coach, get ready. We're making that switch. So we're out in the court. Bull's like yelling at Coach Williams and yelling at Daryl. We get over into the huddle. It's the below 16 timeout. And Bull would sit like on the scores table. He wouldn't really sit down in the chairs. And Coach said, "You better go and tell him. You better go tell him, Coach." That's what he said to Coach Williams. And Coach Williams got in the huddle. He said, "All right, Bull, we're gonna switch you. You gonna get Ray." Bull leaves the huddle, walks out to half court, and starts yelling at Ray Allen in the huddle. Come on out here and get what's coming to you, Ray. Come on, get it, Ray. And I just remember like looking at Daryl because I was like, man, Daryl just started shaking his head, smiling. He said, let's go. And that was really the whole time out. Because like we were all so selfless in whatever we could do to make that team better and make that team win. And that was the magic of who we were, from different backgrounds, different places. But we didn't think anybody could beat us. And even, beating them and then turn around beating Bob Huggins in Cincinnati, and just the run and the faces of the people when we would get to the airport or when we get back to the hotel, how much it meant to the people of the state of Mississippi to do something that nobody from Alabama had done at the time, nobody from Ole Miss, nobody from Auburn, nobody from any of these places. It put us on the map. But what I don't think we knew, and we've seen this happen with Alabama basketball, high school especially, since Auburn went to the Final Four. After we went to the Final Four, Ole Miss won the West the next 2 years, and then you had like 4 or 5 kids come straight out and go to the NBA, right? That happened in Mississippi. Alabama has seen this. Look at Dwayne Brown. Look at LeBaron Philon. Look at these guys that have been products of what has come from a Final Four, and then now you see all these teams starting to be good because basketball is important. That's why the tournament's so important. That's why the Final Four is so important. I heard Holly Rose say today that other than the World Cup, that the NCAA tournament is probably the one thing that is the most American and how we pull for underdogs. And that's just kind of who we are as a country. And I think that was a cool analogy and a cool way to look at it. So the tournament experience for me, I did not appreciate how blessed I was at all, but boy, I sure do now.
I want you to just take us inside a little bit more, and we're going to have to go here in a second. We'll do part two, very soon. But
on the studio, we'll do part two.
I mean, we may do a whole drama series.
Bro, get a camera to follow me around. I've been saying that for years.
Yeah. But for somebody that'll never go to the Final Four, other than maybe to be a photographer, take us inside about kind of what that's like, kind of the media stuff, the, buses, like transportation, how you get there when you show up. I mean, do you almost feel like, Hoosiers walking in there, and Coach Williams pulls the tape up to show that it's, I mean, is that what it was like? What was it like? I mean,
well, I'll tell you this. It's the only time in my life, and I got a lot of Walker County ties too. I am from Winfield, went to high school there, but my grandparents my dad grew up in Cordova, my mama grew up in Eldridge. And thing about Walker County is it ain't usually real good when there's a lot of police lights around. Boy, I love them police lights around in that run the SEC and the NCAA tournament because you got escort, bro. A police escort to where you ain't nothing going wrong. But that was cool. That was the first police escort I'd ever been a part of. You know, like when you're on the buses and the Mississippi State bus, Everett Kenner would go everywhere. He drove to New York, wherever we were, Indianapolis, Lexington. Just to see that familiarity of face of Mississippi State, you know, you feel at home because it is new territory. It is different. Um, I'll tell you this story. My dad and I went to the Final Four. I was at the Danny Manning game. A lot of people don't know this story. Oklahoma came through the Southeast Regional. Daddy was living in Charlotte. They went to Charlotte and won, and then they came to Birmingham in the regional and won. And I loved that team. It was Stacey King, Ricky Grace, Mookie Blaylock, Billy Tubbs. I loved that Oklahoma team. Got me a Oklahoma Sooners hat, my dad did. So we were watching the regional in '88, and they won. And he said, "Son, you really like this team, don't you?" And I said, "Daddy, I love them." I said, "I think they're going to win it." He said, "You want to go out there?" He said, "I can't promise you we get a ticket." He said, "We can go out there." And my daddy drove me out to the Final Four. Didn't get a ticket on that Saturday. I was crushed and heartbroken. Opening day, we went to a baseball game, and George Bell hit 3 home runs against the Royals for the Blue Jays. And I was at that game. And then that night, on that Monday night, we weren't going to get a ticket. And then these guys who had just won their tickets through some lottery knew we'd been looking and walked up to my dad and said, "Hey man, we saved 1 ticket for your son and we'll take $150 for it." And like scalping was illegal. So like there was been people getting arrested and stuff and here and there. And so my daddy bought me that ticket for $150 and he didn't get in the game.
Oh, wow.
And I ran in there, no money, no phone. This is 1988, nothing. I ran and let boys, and I'm out, bro. I'm in the game.
You're like 11.
Yeah. I mean, in Kemper Arena, there's only 70,000 people in there. Kansas, Duke, Oklahoma, and somebody else. I can't remember who else it was. But I was at the very top.
Michigan.
Might have been, but they had these signs that said 64 minus 62 equals Big 8. I still got it because they were both in the Big 8 back then. It was Oklahoma playing Kansas. And I was at the very top of those rafters by myself, and my father didn't get in that game. But the one thing I remember about it is when I walked in from the concourse into that place, I got a headache. And I call it an electric headache. There was so much electricity in that place. And the only other time I ever felt that it was kind of like that in the state tournament when all those like 10,000, 12,000 people, the first time I played in that front of that many people, but it wasn't the same. But when I ran out for the Final Four, Al, and like we ran out to go to shoot around, and I got that same electric headache. There's an electricity that I felt, and it's a spirit thing, you know, maybe a love of basketball, you know, just the presence. But that when you're in the arena in the Final Four, that headache is electric, and that's the only way I can describe it to people that have never experienced it. The thing about the media attention, I mean, we had never seen anything like that, and that hurt us. It really did because we didn't. We're used to having 4 or 5 reporters at our press conferences after practice. We got 45, right? And I mean, you look up and Leslie Visser's standing there, and like John Feinstein, who just passed away, and like all these folks that like you see on TV, they're talking to us because, whoa, wait, and I really feel like that hurt us in the tournament because the moment was a little bit too big for all of us. But there's nothing like the Final Four, but like the coolest experience, like for my dad to take me to the Final Four, then for me to just to briefly get to play in it, you know, that's like what we was talking about earlier. It just is something that like, you know, that's a blessing that now I do appreciate, and I'm glad that the Lord allowed me to have those experiences.
All right. So one more thing, and you've got to humor me with this. I mean, I want you to give me your national champion. And before you do that, I want you to put the glasses on. Let our 7 people that are going to watch this see you.
Do
Give
I
me
look like Dion? Because that's whose they are.
give me your national champion 2024-25 NCAA, one shining moment. confetti drop national champion.
I was on
the BH special.
I think it's cool that you brought one shining moment up in the BH special because I was actually on one shining moment. That's like my claim to fame in basketball ever. Bro, I'm going with Florida, and I'm like everybody else. Everybody's got them. Everybody's whatever. They're going to have to play. I want to see that St. John's, Florida game. That's the game I'm looking forward to, maybe more than any game in the entire tournament if it happens, including a Florida-Auburn rematch. I've already seen that one. But, man, Florida doesn't have a whole lot of holes, and I just don't know. Foul trouble doesn't hurt them, right? I mean, I don't see from a matchup. Here's what I'll say about Florida, though. If they lose, it's going to be early to where they can't get that mojo back rolling. It'd be like the second round or something like that.
They're just tough, man. I mean, they're tough.
They're playing so fast, dude. They're playing faster than everybody else, too. Watch their bigs. All the young kids out there that like would watch this with their parents, when their bigs either block a shot or contest a shot or get a rebound, watch how fast they run down the court.
They get down the floor, their whole team. They get down the floor. I mean, the game against Alabama, it was Snowbird City.
Correct.
I mean, like, playing in Tuscaloosa, it was like they had – how many runouts did they have?
That's depth. That's because it's like buckyball. When these kids are coming in the game, they're playing at the highest elite level they can play till they tire themselves out and have to come out, and then it's a whole nother wave when you got 10, 11 guys.
I agree with you. I think it's going to be Florida. I think it's going to be Florida, Alabama in the finals.
Of course you do.
Well, why not? I mean,
Hey, I'm not – look. If there's anybody that ain't gonna say they just can't do it, hey, it ain't gonna be Chris Jans' boy because Chris Jans ain't beat him yet. We can't beat Alabama. I feel like we're turning back into football.
Look, I've got Auburn in the Final Four, but I mean, you've got the matchup with Auburn, Florida, so you can't have an Auburn, Florida championship game matchup.
Yeah, and I don't have Alabama. I will say this: if Alabama was healthy, I'd have Alabama overdue. If I knew Grant Nelson was healthy, but you don't have that right fortunately he's healthy, I'm gonna change my bracket. And it's the same thing with Cooper Flag. That's why I was thinking that's that one bracket I think that's gonna be a little bit funky to where like you might have some upsets, but that could benefit Alabama to your point.
All right, man. Well, hey, I really do appreciate this. This has been great stuff. I enjoyed our, calling the game back in December. Appreciate you inviting me on. Man, you're awesome. And we got to do this again.
Dude, you just let me know when, man, and edit that thing out so I don't sound all crazy. But use whatever you want, my friend.
See you, buddy.
See you, bro.
And that's a wrap. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Tailgate Podcast. And in the meantime, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. We'll see you next time.